Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Southern Talks from the NATO Strategic Direction South Hub. We're talking to you live from Naples in Italy, and we're joined today, very lucky to have Dr. Amr Al Azm, who I actually met a few months ago in Turkey, Bodrum. If you get a chance, please go to Turkey, Bodrum. It's a lovely, lovely place. And he gave us a wonderful, really interesting insight into terrorist financing during a conference on emerging threats. It was a fascinating tour de force, and that's why we've got him back with us here today. Dr. Amr, good morning, or good morning to you because you're in the US. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, it is morning, but and probably afternoon where you are.
That is, yeah, it is indeed. It is indeed nice and hot here in Naples, Italy. Before we start, I'd just like to go through Dr. Amr's long and distinguished biography. And I think it's well worth listening to see what he's been up to in the last few years. So Dr. Amr was educated in the UK, University College London, graduated with a doctoral degree in 1991. He was founder and director of the Scientific Conservation Laboratories at the General Department of Antiquities Museums and taught at the University of Damascus up until 2006. He currently teaches the Gulf Studies program at Qatar University in the Foreign Service School at Georgetown University, Qatar. He is also a tenured professor of Middle East history and anthropology at Shawnee State University in Ohio. Dr. Amr is a keen follower and a commentator of current affairs in Syria and the Middle East in general, and has written numerous articles for journals and all major outlets, including editorials for New York Times, Time Magazine, Foreign Affairs, and Foreign Policy. He is also the founder and board member of the Day After Project and currently coordinates the Heritage Protection Initiative for the Cultural Heritage Protection at the Day After Project. And he is also a co-director at the Antiquities, Trafficking and Heritage Anthropology and Research Project. So as you can tell, someone who's very, very qualified and ultimately knows his stuff about the subject that we're talking about today. And if I'll just introduce it, if I may. So we're talking about terrorist financing, and in particular, cultural looting and the looting of antiquities, and how that's goes onto social media and how that finances terrorist groups. Dr. Amr, could you just give us a quick sense of how you got into this subject? Where did this come from? When did you first start researching this area?
Right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Duncan. It's a great pleasure and honor to talk to you today and talk to your colleagues and anyone else who will be listening to us. I think I just kind of reflecting, I was thinking as you were kind of saying this and just in our previous conversation, that a lot of what I've chosen to do in my life has been almost accidental, where I'd be heading off in one direction and then something comes up or something happens and then I stop to look at it, or I even then decide to pivot to do whatever it is I want to do. And I think this is where I call this, it's kind of opportunism, where you develop a knack to kind of see opportunities, see things in a way and kind of focus on them that perhaps other people don't. And it's an act that you develop over time. And I would say that this is exactly how this happened. I'm an archaeologist by trade. I worked and studied and looked at the Middle East for many, many years. And so when in 2011, sort of the Arab Spring started to spread across the Middle East, and it came to Syria, obviously, in March of 2011, very quickly we saw this, what starts off as peaceful protests, people just going out in the streets demanding change, ultimately develop into a full-scale military armed confrontation between the Syrian regime, Assad's regime, and the opposition. And right from the start, cultural heritage, cultural sites, cultural property becomes a casualty of this conflict. And that should be no surprise because we've seen this before. So the story is not in that. And my kind of involvement in that was in that a lot of my students and colleagues who were still in Syria, who had obviously were still working and living in Syria at that time, because I'd left in 2006 to go to the US, and decided that they wanted to, they were asking us, what do we do? How do we sort of address this? What do we do? Can you help us? And that's sort of how I got into looking at that problem. And from there, we started to notice something very, very concerning. And it was not just the looting activity that was happening, but also who was doing it and why they were doing it. And kind of going from just simply wanting to protect cultural property in times of conflict, which is a very important and a very good thing to do, to make that jump from there to the terrorism financing, that's where it takes a little bit more kind of thinking in terms of how you see that and how you make those connections. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that. Again, another great introduction. Well, I'll let you share your slides and then take it away. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to be, I'm going to be talking to you today about basically the following points. This is a short outline of my talk for today. And I want to focus on the following points, because I know a lot of my audience are not practitioners or necessarily focused on this specific issue of the importance of not just why we need to protect cultural property, antiquities, but also how that then links and connects to funding of conflicts, terrorism financing, etc. So I want to make that connection between how cultural property and specifically antiquities are a resource that essentially generates income for those involved in its looting and trafficking. And I also want to then connect that to the second point, which is that looting of cultural property in conflict zones occurs at an extreme and intensive scale. And we've seen this demonstrated time and again in the last 10, 15 years with the, I should say even from the, even 20 years, if you will, if you go back to the Iraq war as well, the invasion of Iraq and and Afghanistan after 9/11 and so on and so forth. The third point I want to also bring into our conversation today is the role of social media, where social media is now seen as a major amplifier of trafficking and sale of looted cultural property. And then I'm going to then jump into how militant groups are non-state actors and designated terror groups, extremist groups like Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, HTS, that's Hayat Tahrir Sham, the HB, ISK, which are all either Al-Qaeda affiliates or, extremist organizations in their own right. And essentially, these groups basically benefit from looting and trafficking, and looking at how social media companies also profit from this illicit trade. And finally, just looking at the threat to the region and beyond from groups like ISKP, Houthis, and AQAP, all of which have been in the news recently. So to kind of start us off and maybe introduce those of you who are kind of not so familiar with our topic, I just want to remind you, because I'm sure you're already sort of aware of this, that the Arab world is very rich in cultural heritage sites and monuments. If you go right across North Africa, thinking from Morocco to Egypt to Tunis to Libya to Egypt, obviously, if you think of ancient pharaonic Egypt, to the Levant, and that would be sort of what is today designated as Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Israel, Iraq, Iran, and right across Turkey, obviously, as well, and the Gulf. Well, the Gulf region is a much wider area, but let's say those parts of the Gulf that have a very rich cultural heritage. And in those parts of the world, practically everyone either lives on top of an archaeological site, next door to an archaeological site or within a stone's throw of an archaeological site. And why is that important to know? Because it means it's everywhere. Everybody knows where it is. You can't walk anywhere, dig anywhere, touch anything that's not somehow connected to your past. Think of a city like Damascus or Aleppo in Syria. These are both known as some of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, which means there you have massive layers of human occupation over not just hundreds of years, but in some cases thousands of years, all piled up on top of each other. And that means that they're very rich in artifacts, in antiquities, in monuments, etc., all buried underneath the ground, and some of it already obviously showing up over the ground. So in order for us to kind of see this for what it is, it's also important for us to understand that this cultural property and antiquities are a valuable resource, and the sale of this cultural property can generate income. So think of it this way. You have, large groups of population living densely or spread out, whichever way, over a very rich layer of cultural heritage, and that cultural heritage is of value. So you're literally, if you think about it, you have millions of people living on top of what is essentially a treasure trove, and all you have to do is dig a little bit and you'll find something, and then if you know what you're doing, you can then sell it. The second thing we should sort of kind of put into perspective here is what causes greatest damage. Often there's this kind of misconception or I should say perception that, and that's what we often see in the news, is usually in a conflict zone, either a missile or an artillery shell or an explosion taking out a site or a monument. And of course, I don't need to remind you of the images of, let's say, a group like Islamic State, ISIS, when they went in and blew up the Temple of Bel in Palmyra, or destroyed the site of Hatra in Iraq, and or even some of the images of cultural heritage sites being destroyed just because they happen to be in the path of or in the middle of a battlefield, essentially, and they become battlefield casualties. But that's not actually the greatest sort, even though that's what makes the headlines. It's not the greatest sort of damage. The greatest source of damage is actually caused by looting. And that's what doesn't make the headlines, okay? And for us, therefore, when we look at this issue and we look at the challenge to, let's say, we look at the threat to cultural heritage and also the need to protect cultural heritage, it's usually looting that is our greatest concern, rather than damage from actual sort of, where it's part of the battlefield, where it's being subjected to actual physical attack as a result of an ongoing conflict. And the reason for the looting is to a great extent is the fact that many of the states during these conflicts lose their ability to properly protect and administer their cultural heritage. This breakdown in the institutions that are usually in charge or assigned the task to protect cultural heritage are no longer functioning. And when you combine that with the catastrophic destruction of livelihoods, businesses, jobs, etc., the ability of people to basically make a living, you have the perfect, if you will, conditions for people to turn to alternative means of subsistence. And we usually refer to this as opportunistic or subsistence looting. And that's how kind of in these sorts of conditions, that's where often the looting will take off. That's not to say that there wasn't looting before a conflict starts. There've always been mafias, criminal elements, and long-standing networks that go back many, many decades and possibly even hundreds of years. So the takeaway kind of point here is that looting has always occurred. It exists. It happens, usually depending on, the state, but you usually also have state institutions that try to protect, that try to prevent this from happening, or at least minimize its impact. Once you have a conflict, once these state institutions are either sidelined, impaired, or no longer able to do, to fulfill their duties, which is what we've seen in the last few years in places like Libya, in Yemen, in Syria, etc., then you have this catastrophic explosion of looting, coupled with the need for people to find alternative means to survive. And to kind of put this into scale for you, I'm going to show you two satellite images. They're well known, but it just kind of maybe helps us focus our mind on this. The first one is from 2011 from a well-known archaeological site in northwest Syria called Apamea. It's a satellite image. You can see the kind of you can see the site there. There's I don't know if you can see it over here. I'll try and move my cursor. There's the part of the sort of the colonnaded road here, and then I'm going to show you what happens just 12 months later. Just 12 months later, okay? This is what happens. At the same site, same image. There's the colonnaded sort of oops. There's the colonnaded area here. You can see it right here, okay? And these are the looting pits. And this is just after 1 year. And if you see the image in 2013, it will have spread over to here. And in 2014, it just spreads and spreads and spreads. This site has been completely looted. And in just 1 year, this is the damage. And if you, I know you can't see the scale of these pits, but these are not small post holes. These are not small kind of little, little pits or holes in the ground, like where you drive a stake in. These are massive holes, 7 meters wide, several meters deep, each and every one of them. So this is why when we talk about looting as being the major threat and cause of damage to cultural property, this is what we're looking at.
Dr. Amr, is there any sort of estimate as like how many people would have been on that site during those 12 months digging those holes? Is there how many?
Hundreds, probably, I would say. I mean, think of it this way. This was part of the front line in 2012. Yeah. And from the accounts we have, literally the participants in the conflict would take time out and go in to loot in between during the lulls of the fighting, because it was so profitable. You have the regime forces on one side, you have the opposition forces on the other side, and they would literally from time to time, during the lulls or breaks in the fighting, all go in and loot. Everybody was doing it. It okay. Becomes a free-for-all. And that's part of the nature of this type of situation. Once again, you have a change once one group or one entity takes over. In the case of the areas that ultimately end up under opposition control, the results were varied depending on what the local communities wanted to do. In some cases, they just left it open and anybody could you know, it almost develops its own sort of local, let's say, rules on how to do it. I remember one person recounting to me in southern Syria where they set up their own rules on how to dig and what was allowable. So somebody tried one time to bring in a mechanical digger, and he was thrown off site and told he was a barbarian for trying to do that. That all digging should only be done by hand. In other situations, you have a group like Islamic State taking over, and then they sort of put their own rules on how to control this activity. They demand that you acquire a license. They demand a fee from it, and they demand sort of what you might call a sales tax on your profits. So it varies, but usually something like this, you'd have hundreds of people sort of digging, and it doesn't take very long to do this kind of damage. Now, one thing to consider here is the fact that until 2012, okay, all this looting here, you can get huge amounts of goods from the ground, but you've got to think of the Antiquities looting and trafficking situation as a supply and demand, like any sort of illicit substance. You have a supply end and you have a demand end. And it should be no surprise to you that whilst the supply is obviously from these conflict sort of zones like Syria, like Yemen, like Libya, the demand side is obviously Western Europe and North America. That's where the biggest demand for these goods are. And the challenge has always been, how do you connect someone who's found something like this in the ground, has acquired a valuable mosaic or a valuable sort of statue or something like that. They know it's valuable. They know they might even know what it's worth or not, but they know that they can get some money for it. How do they then connect that to the demand side? How do you tell someone sitting in Paris or London or anywhere else, hey, I've got something you might like? And this is where the second part of our story comes in, and that's the social media part and the role it plays in the amplification of this activity. So we know that since 2011, there's been a steady increase in the systematic and aggressive looting of archaeological sites in the region. And obviously that's tied to the conflicts that we just discussed. But this also then coincides with another phenomenon, even more important and possibly sort of life-changing, if you will, and that is the increase in popularity of social media, particularly Facebook after 2011, and the creation of numerous groups currently based in the countries of the Arab world, which populate various parts of Facebook. So, and you can see that Facebook in many ways has been accredited, along with Twitter and other social media platforms, with the rise of and spread of protests and the Arab Spring across the region, and in some cases the changes that it brought with it. You can see from this slide that today we have millions and millions of users spread across different countries in the Arab world. And if you want to see the exponential growth of Facebook users in the MENA between 2011 and 2017, I think you can see here, look at the difference in numbers between and the amount of growth, particularly in countries like Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Yemen, all of which are conflict currently in some form of conflict or another. And of course, then this social media becomes essentially the perfect sort of platform for which looters and traffickers can now connect. So if you remember, I told you that you have a supply end and a demand end, and the challenge or the bottleneck, if you will, for this has always been, how does the supply side communicate with the demand side? And pre-2011, pre sort of social media, only through known traffickers, known interlocutors, mafias, which have existed for a long time, but it still creates a bottleneck. Social media changes it. And because it allows basically people on social media to communicate and connect directly with would-be potential buyers on the other side, and much, much more. And this is, we came upon this as part of our research, and this is what the Athar project, which is I'm the co-director of, uses. It looks at open source, we do open source investigations on social media platforms, on also YouTube, on TikTok, on and any other, not just Facebook now, because we've had to expand as looters and traffickers become more creative. We've had to sort of follow their trends, and we gather all this information and record it. In fact, the Athar project to date has over 30,000 images captured of looted and trafficked antiquities on social media. We currently monitor over 490 groups. That's just in the MENA region. It's important for you to kind of remember that. We haven't looked at, we know there's an emerging market in, or there's a growing, I should say, problem, if not already out of control, in Central South America. We know there's definitely been an uptick in activity in, for example, other conflict zones like Ukraine, especially after the start of the recent war there. And just in our 490 plus groups, we have over 12 million members in those. And I know I'm showing you that this one group here has 530,000 members. About a couple of months ago, one of our groups hit 1 million members. So these are not small groups with a few guys sitting in their basement kind of talking to each other. You're talking about large groups where this kind of trading, communication, discussions, etc., are all occurring on these groups. And so essentially, you think about it this way. The same, so you open your Facebook page maybe in the evening before you go to bed, or in the morning, or during the day, or whatever, and you might take a selfie of yourself having a coffee and say, look, I'm on my break, I'm having my coffee, or here's what I did over the weekend with my family, and you share that picture, or you share a thread, and then somebody might say, oh, where did you get this nice whatever it is? And you'll say, oh yeah, I bought it from such and such, they're having a sale. All this kind of chit chat and general socializing that you're doing on social media, on Facebook, becomes the perfect toolkit for any would-be looter or trafficker, because the same features that you and I are using to buy our coffee, to tell our friends, our family members, or anyone else we care to hear about what we're doing with our life, also are exactly perfect for would-be looters and traffickers to go out and do their thing as well. Because now a looter or a trafficker can be digging in his field or his chosen site, and he or she, I should say, because there are she's involved in this as well, would find something. They would take a selfie of it with them, with themselves and the item, and then they would post it on Facebook, and then millions of people, as you can see, potentially can now, or if they're members of that group or groups that this item has been posted in, can now see it, can now also communicate via Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever means of communication, and it's all encrypted, of course. They can arrange, they can negotiate, they can arrange payments, and it can all be done basically through this social media setup. And how do we know it's happening? Because we have the evidence, we can see it. Okay, and just remember, Facebook has over 2 billion users globally. By comparison, eBay has only around 182, 183 million. So the scale and the scope of how this is happening on social media is just staggering, and also very different from the on-sale sites like eBay, like Etsy, and so on and so forth, where we do see some sales happening. In fact, and some people have done research on that. But this is different because this is totally uncontrolled. And you can see from the sizes of the memberships that these items get exposed, get shown to very large numbers. And I should perhaps point out here that not every one of these members is interacting or writing or talking, okay? Very few are actually, but it doesn't matter because a lot of these are just silent members that are just sitting there. And when they see something they want, they may not even comment on the post itself. They'll just sort of, send a private message to the seller, and then we will never know or never see it. But as a result of that, we have a situation where Facebook and similar social media platforms end up essentially allowing the fueling of the illicit antiquities trade right across the region, a region that is basically conflict driven. And you look at, again, I've highlighted them in in kind of burgundy color, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, just to name a few here, all of which have suffered intensive extreme looting during the conflict and have some of the biggest groups active on Facebook in this case. And as a result of this, basically you have people, right across, and there's a transnational element to this as well, because people connect with each other on, the connectivity that Facebook and social media platforms like Facebook allow you essentially connect you right across. So you have people, for example, here in Myanmar listing items on Facebook. You have people in Syria listing items on Facebook groups. They don't even need to leave their location. They can do it right where they find. They find the object, they take the picture, they post it, and you're good to go. And you can maximize and intensify your searches as well. This is a good example from Libya, where a user in Derna posted the same Greco-Roman statue in at least 3 different Facebook groups. So he's maximizing the number of potential, let's say, buyers, prospective buyers, who might see his find or his acquisition, his looted item. And the membership, as I said, is very high. Look at the numbers. These are not small groups. They're in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and as I said, in some cases, our groups have reached 1 million, and it's transnational. So this is one of our this is one of my favorites, where you have a Buddhist statue being offered by a Yemeni trafficker in Syria in a Syrian-based Facebook group. So Buddhist statue offered by a Yemeni trafficker in a Syrian-based Facebook group. So the groups are not necessarily, so if you look at a group that is, let's say, the administrator in Syria, that does not mean everybody is from Syria. They can be from anywhere in the world. Did you want to say something, Duncan?
So is it likely that this Buddhist statue, that wasn't necessarily found in Syria, that was found somewhere else in the world, but because of the amount of traffic, as it were, that's happening on social media around sort of North Africa, Middle East, that these are the sites that they would use?
I mean, that's where a lot of these active groups are. So what I'm trying to say here is that if a group is, let's say, based in Libya or based in Yemen or based in Iraq, it doesn't matter where it's based. You'll have people from other countries, other conflicts, posting there if they think they can get a sale.
Okay.
And that's the transnational globalizing of the whole process. And I should also, I'll come to that in a minute. So you have, for example, here from Syria, from different parts of Syria, items being offered for sale in Facebook groups. And often you'll see that people who find these items will even take selfies to prove authenticity of the item. This is a collection of very beautiful mosaics that were found, dug up in northern Syria. And I think we managed to track, they were taken, obviously they were looted, and we tried to track them for a while through some colleagues who knew the looters, and until I believe they got as far as Lebanon, and then they disappeared out of Lebanon. That was, if my memory serves me. And then that's it. And it's worthwhile noting here that these images are not only important because they document an act, an event, but also because this is the only evidence we have that these items ever existed in our history. So even just from a historical perspective, you wouldn't know that these objects, because they were buried, they were covered. They're not, these are not items taken out of a museum where there's a records, there's a catalog somewhere, they're in a database somewhere that the museum controls or has, and they've been studied, or these have never been seen before. The first time anyone has ever known of the existence of these items is when that person happened to take a selfie of himself or have someone take a picture of him with those mosaics. And that's the only record. And now that they've disappeared, we've lost that record. So this is the only evidence that we have that they ever existed. And that's why this kind of documentation is also quite important. Again, Afghanistan, whole horde of items, and look at the dates and when they're posted: September 7th, 2022, February 15th, 2022, March 2021. I mean, that should give you an indication of how, as conflicts intensify, looting and trafficking of cultural property from these parts of the world basically intensifies as well. And this is a good moment to also remind us that these things don't only, just because I'm focusing on cultural property, doesn't mean that cultural property is the only thing that's trafficked in these groups, and even on social media platforms and on Facebook. The same guys who are promoting and offering cultural property for sale is now also offering offers hand grenades for sale. And we have entire groups just dedicated to the sale and exchange and trafficking of arms. That's another whole category in its own right. I've seen, basically, I think it was a guy in Yemen talking to a guy in Libya about procuring 50 mil caliber shells to a guy in Iraq. And it's open. It's not, this is not dark web. You don't need to go to the dark web. This is being openly advertised and traded and in groups on Facebook. And these guys will have, I mean, obviously you can see we've kind of, mashed out the information here, and that's just because of our own research needs. But these guys are not hiding. This is not sort of blacked out like that because they're hiding. This is us sort of kind of trying to follow certain rules in terms of how we present our information. But these guys will post their phone numbers, they'll post their contact details. They want you to reach out to them. They want you to talk to them. They want you to buy their products. And it's no surprise, therefore, to you that the guy who traffics in looted antiquities to make money will also, if it's in a conflict zone, will also traffic in weapons, and if any other contraband or illicit material that he has available. So if you happen to be in Afghanistan or in an area, let's say, that also has, let's say, other commodities like oil, they'll traffic in oil, or petroleum products. If it happens to be drugs, they'll traffic in drugs as well. So don't be surprised if you see a certain amount of intermixing or intermingling between these different sort of products that in real life have no connection to each other. What does petroleum products and byproducts have to do with drugs, have to do with weapons, have to do with cultural property? Nothing, except that they're a resource and that they can be exploited and they can be sold. And if I can, and they can all be trafficked illicitly. And if I can traffic in one, I can traffic in the other. And that's why we see this. And again, human trafficking, anything that can be trafficked, I guarantee you will find groups on Facebook, on social media, promoting it, intensifying it, and allowing it to occur.
And is there any indication about, so someone might start off trafficking looted cultural pieces, for example, because perhaps that's slightly easier to get hold of with a spade and some time, that they then move on to trafficking other things that they might find? Or is this existing trafficking groups who have seen a niche here and have seen a way to make money, or is it just a bit of a mix?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, usually think of it this way. As the looting and trafficking becomes more and more organized, and depending on who's organizing it, who's running it, they will be involved in numerous other illicit, illegal activities. So you take a group that is like Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. They basically, controlled entire sectors of the economy, and some of it they controlled illicitly. They trafficked illicitly, and some of it not. So you have if you're controlling the trade in let's say smuggling, you're in a border area, you're in control of smuggling goods across border areas, you're going to be trafficking in all of this stuff. If you're an armed non-state actor, you can be buying and selling weapons in addition to buying and selling antiquities to fund you and fuel your activities. And remember, this stuff comes out of the ground in this case. And one of the things that makes antiquities kind of a softer option is that it's there. First of all, there is a legal trade, and the boundaries between the legal trade and the illicit trade are a little bit gray. There's a legal market, and that everyday normal people can go and just, you can walk into a store in New York or in Paris or in London and legally purchase legitimately acquired antiquities. All right. And it's a billion, the trade is worth billions of dollars, I believe. There's various numbers that have been floated around. I'm not going to quote them, but these numbers exist. So in that case, how do you know if an item has been acquired legally or illegally? That becomes the challenge, and that's where you have to do your due diligence and so on and so forth. But in the case of heroin, there is no legal market. It's all illicit. In the case of even weapons, you can't just walk into a store on the Champs-Élysées and order 2 boxes of 50 mil caliber ammunition. It's a highly restricted sort of market that occurs only between very specifically, licensed or state designated entities that are allowed to have this kind of material. The US is obviously an anomaly, an exception here, but so I'm not including it because of the laws they have in this country about bearing of arms. But Northern Europe, at least, which is a huge part of the market, does not have that. You can't just walk into a store and ask for a box of rocket propelled grenades, but you can walk into a store and purchase for substantial amounts of money artifacts that come from this part of the world and elsewhere. And some of these have been looted from museums. As you can see, this is an item with a museum accession number being offered for sale openly. So there's no question this item has been looted, and looted from a museum in this case. Again, Libya, lots of statues and lots of artifacts from there. And then you also have marketplace. This is kind of it's been sort of an emerging problem for us in the last few years as it becomes more and more popular. And look at and the reason why I put this up there. This is in the US. Okay, this is a person who has this item. She's, in this case, it's a she. We know it's a she. Is offering it for sale in the US. And look at the price. And that's why I have it up here. Look, 185,000. So this is not chump change. We're not talking about, small oil lamp for kind of $20. We're talking about, high-end artifacts that bring in a substantial amount of money. This item here, this is from London, £5,000. Or is it dollars? I can't see, but and again. This is just from Turkey. This is the smaller end, let's say. This is from Gaziantep. But all of this is occurring from the most expensive to the least, to the small bits and pieces. And it's occurring on Marketplace. That's just another platform.
And can these accounts be traced, or do those people presumably they know?
Yes, they're open. That's the whole point. They're open. They're not secret. This is not dark web. When we started doing our research, just like a quick anecdotal thing here, we thought we were looking at an iceberg effect. We thought that basically we're just seeing the surface, but there's going to be a huge bulge underneath in the dark web. And we eventually were given some keys, because you can't just wander into the dark web. You have to, you need keys to get into there. And we managed to get some keys to go and take a look. And no surprise, there was almost nothing there. Why? Because you go to the dark web when you're being you're being chased, or you're being scrutinized, or there's a danger to you. These guys don't need to hide. They can do it in the open, and they're doing it in the open, as you can see. So there's no reason for them to hide.
Because governments in conflict zones, they clearly don't have the capacity and the means to follow this stuff. But are there governments in the marketplace, so Western Europe, North America, that take an interest in this? Or
yes, of course. But until very, very recently, it has not been a priority, and that's one of the reasons why it's been allowed to continue and does continue to happen. But I say until recently, because slowly and gradually, I say, there is a realization that there is a link between that the cultural property and looting and trafficking of cultural property is a valuable resource that armed non-state actors, terrorist designated entities, and so on and so forth, are using this to fund their activities. And we know this in part because in the January 2020 report from the UN Security Council, the monitoring team recommends that the committee write to member states to highlight the growing role of Facebook and other social media platforms as a tool for illicit trafficking of cultural property. So it's becoming more and more, let's say, known now that there is this link between looting and trafficking of cultural property and the role of social media in promoting this looting and trafficking. I believe NATO in 2019, I was told, also finally recognized, or I'm sure they knew before, but actually made it an official part of their sort of, I don't know what you call it, but basically it became an officially sort of noted issue that destruction and looting of cultural property is a major problem when you're dealing with basically terrorist organizations, because of the connection to financing these types of groups. And not only that, just think of it simply, even if it's just a civil war, not dealing with terrorists or anything else, any source of funding, any resource that warring parties can get access to inevitably prolongs the conflict. So if you think about it, just from that level, the fact that there is a lot of these states that are in a sort of long-term now state of conflict are also very rich in cultural property, means there is a rich resource that these various warring parties can tap into to fund as a revenue stream. I don't want anyone to think that this is the main revenue stream. It's not, but it becomes a revenue stream. And in some cases, a very important revenue stream, depending on how rich the area is in cultural property, to fund and fuel and extend the length and life of these conflicts. So whichever way you look at it, whether you're looking at it from a counterterrorism perspective, whether you're looking at it from a terrorism financing perspective, or you're just looking at it from a peacekeeping, I need to kind of figure out a way to end this conflict perspective, focusing on this problem, focusing on the problem of looting and trafficking of cultural property in these conflict zones, focusing on the role of social media as an amplifier and understanding how it works in these areas becomes a relevant issue for you as a you know, as someone from a military perspective, if you will, I'm thinking here of NATO, given who our audience are. And it gets even worse when you think how militants and designated terror groups essentially use social media and again market their artifacts through that. So we know, for example, that there is extremist groups in Syria. Syria is always my go back to because it's the one I know most, and also because where a lot of our initial research, although we've now expanded it to Yemen and Libya, and most recently also Afghanistan. But you have multiple self-identified groups and their supporters that continue to join these pages. And whilst these extremists might probably make a small number of the overall users, it's the problem for us is the what we call commingling. Because remember, you have a group with, I don't know, 500,000 people in it. And it's going to attract anyone who has an interest in basically in either buying, selling, or trafficking in looted antiquities. Yet at the same time, that person may also be associated with a group like that. So you have somebody who's just, you know, let's call him a subsistence looter, a father of 5 children who's just trying to find something to feed his kids. And you have somebody who happens to be sitting not in a conflict zone, but in a let's say in Amman, Jordan, okay, for example. I'm just throwing out hypotheticals, talking to somebody also who happens to be sitting in Paris, who's both concerned about what's happening in Syria, but also maybe interested in buying or selling or acting as an intermediary in just making money. And then you have this guy who's sitting there also, but he not only has goods to sell because he's trying to raise funds for his organization or for himself, but also happens to be engaged in this kind of extremist group activity. And they're all sitting in the same space, talking to each other. And I think you can see the potential for how this commingling then opens up opportunities for recruitment. But it's not a recruitment. It's not like you're seeking the guys, all the guys who are in this group, none of them are looking for extremist activity. But because of the coincidental, let's say, commingling, it opens up opportunities for recruitment. That's a part that's often overlooked, not followed through. And it's very hard to follow because a lot of the conversations become encrypted. You know, once they go into Messenger or one of the encrypted sites, we only see, we as sort of researchers can only see the stuff that's posted in the open. But once that goes off message, but you can tell, and you can, if you follow certain people and you can see that they're maybe communicating with somebody, once they go off, let's say, off the grid, then maybe you want to delve into their own page, because these pages, you know, the are often, these people are not, they're not closed pages. They're personal pages. I'm not talking about the groups. Many of the groups, you have to have access to the groups. They have to allow you in. A lot of them are closed. But the people who are members, many of them have open pages. And then as you see somebody interacting and you look at who they're interacting with, that'll give you an inkling to go back to and then try to see if they're talking to someone who they shouldn't be talking to, or maybe started talking to someone that they don't usually talk to, and so on and so forth. And you can see a lot of these extremists are involved in a variety of activities, including this trafficking of material. Here you have a guy from Libya. He claimed to work for at the 32nd Reinforced Brigade, an elite military unit of Gaddafi loyalists. And he's selling basically an artifact here. Taliban supporters based in Pakistan, interested in purchasing a Buddha, Gandaharan style Buddha. And it doesn't matter even if the item is real or not real or whatever, because remember, Facebook is a means to communicate. So I could go, even if I'm not interested in the item. If I see a potential recruit, then I want to talk to them. I'll feign interest, or I'll offer something I think the other person is interested in. Start up a conversation and then pick up from there. It's you know, it's an easy way to go. And of course, why do they like these portable? Why do they go for these small items? In part because it's easy to carry. And don't forget the portability. Often these people like to travel light. They and they want to move fast. So if you're moving goods, the smaller it is, small and valuable is much more useful to you than big, heavy, even though it's valuable as well, just because of the ease of portability. So larger items can sometimes make more money, but you have a lot of small items, and then it becomes much easier to move around. Manuscripts are very good for this because, and especially if you think of religious Quranic texts, etc., you know, people have this, they'll claim it's their own. It's not unusual to have somebody traveling with a book in their possession of some sort, and whereas, you know, a stone carving might attract attention, or pottery, ceramic might, but you know, a manuscript, maybe not so much. And of course, maybe we should quickly also mention how why do these sorry, do you want to say something?
No, just
all right,
bring my throat. You carry on.
Okay. And so also we should consider why organizations like Facebook allow this kind of activity to occur on their platform, and it's all about profit. Okay, Facebook profits from running these ads. It's about the revenue stream that comes from these from this kind of activity. It far outweighs any sanctions or any you know, pressure that we can put on groups like Facebook or YouTube, etc., to take this stuff down, or not allow it to get on their platform in the first place. And now you basically have a situation that is way out of control. And you can see here in this example where you have somebody you know, selling, I believe, a metal detector, which probably in Egypt is illegal. And alongside it, you have adverts for basically advertising artifacts for sale. Next, so this is Facebook advertising next to someone selling a metal detector, which might be legal to sell in the US, but illegal, for example, in a place like Syria. Again, so the algorithm does not filter out criminal content or content that violates Facebook. And the problem is with the way the algorithm is set up. That's the real issue, because the algorithm not only think of it this way. You know, we all joke about how the internet is listening to us. The minute you kind of think of something, or maybe do a quick search on Google, and the next thing your email and your social media and your Amazon account are being bombarded with adverts for a product or something that it thinks you inquired about. The Facebook is the same. It's the same kind of process, where it notices what you're interested in, it knows what you're interested in, and it'll start pushing people and groups and you know, anything that links to what you're interested in. So so Facebook knows that I'm interested in antiquities. So as soon as it knows I'm interested in antiquities, it automatically starts to push these groups, inviting me, encouraging me to join them. So the algorithm assists in promoting this whole activity. That's part of the problem. And that the algorithm, by its very nature, is to connect you with other people who are interested in what you're interested in. So if I happen to be interested in, you know, I don't know, pigs, I'm going to get bombarded with pigs. But if I happen to be interested in jihadi activity, then I'm going to be bombarded with like-minded jihadis. And if I happen to be interested in looting and trafficking of antiquities, I'm going to be bombarded with groups that are focused on looting and trafficking. And not only that, when it can't find a group for you to join, it will create one. We have numerous examples of terrorist-type groups, literally, where it'll create a We Love Bin Laden group or something like that, and then it'll invite you to join it. And it'll invite others to do the same. And this is you know, part of the major problem. And of course, once it's got you in a group, it'll start pushing advertising towards you. So in the case, if you remember this very valuable item, and then you have basically advertisers being pushed on the same place. And it's not just Facebook. Google profits from the trafficking as well. In this case, basically, you know, you have essentially Google this group, and then it offers you an ad that offers to sell your your looted treasures, secrets of discovering treasures and burials. We offer exclusive Google Play application. It collects the secrets of discovering treasures and burials, and you know, and it helps you sort of you know, do things with it. The ads are just non-stop. We enable you to send pictures of your antique pieces to the largest auction in the world. And you know, it's actually helping you take your looted antiquities and connecting you to Christie's and other major auction houses in Western Europe. The algorithm does the work for you and promotes advertising that will do the work for you. Again, YouTube is another great one. These guys are very creative. You know, these guys basically not only will basically dig and loot, but then they will also make videos of themselves looting and then get likes, and then they will make money especially if they get a lot of likes. They'll start to make money on the YouTube video as well. So this guy will make money on the YouTube video, and then he might even make money on the sale once he's sold the item. And you know, it just these videos become extremely popular sometimes. TikTok the same. TikTok's becoming very, very popular, so you have the same thing happening on these types of platforms. And you have these guys just promoting all these activities. And we know that Facebook's tried to ban this kind of activity on its platform. They contacted us back in 2020 when they wanted to do it. But in the end, they decided that the only thing they're going to do is to rely on self-reporting. And we know that self-reporting doesn't work because Facebook has no interest in really kind of taking these groups down or even, restricting the trade because it makes too much money from it. So, here we are, we report, we did a test, we reported items just to see what happens. And obviously, our feedback, it's clearly looted item, clearly offered for sale, clearly in violation of the new community standards. And, the Facebook did not remove the content. So we know that they're not interested really in doing it. Finally, for the last part, I just want to sort of demonstrate, because they've been in the news recently, and also make that final connection between current, if you will, let's say, activity by groups like ISKP, Islamic State Khorasan Province, and the looting and trafficking of cultural property. We know that they've launched numerous attacks in the last few years. We know that they had their suicide bombers in Pakistan in July 2023, in August 23, and January 24. The attacks in Iran in January 24, also in Istanbul, and then in March 2024. That's just a few months ago in Moscow. And now, most recently, the attacks in Dagestan, the Derbent, and I can't even try to pronounce that other city, where, although they haven't claimed those two latest attacks, they've certainly approved of them, at least. And it's kind of interesting when you look at the areas under ISK, either kind of nominal control or ISK activity areas, and you can see that there's Tajikistan, where at least in the most recent attacks in Turkey and in Moscow have been Tajik mercenaries, and we can see a connection between increase in looting in those areas that you can see highlighted here, and the increase in attacks. So obviously, looting is a revenue stream for ISKP. It's not the only revenue stream, obviously, but it's a revenue stream. And we should not be surprised to see, or one of the ways in which you can maybe think of even predicting where threats might be coming from is to see if there is, if you monitor looting and trafficking activity in certain regions, and then if you see an increase or an uptick, then that could be an indicator or predictor of what's to come down the line. I'm not saying that it's like weeks and months afterwards. It could, but basically you see an increase in activity in certain areas. And then you can see here, all of these are basically sites that have been either attacked or looted. And again, the proximity to the border is not accidental, because that's how you're going to smuggle your money and your goods out of the areas that you're looting. And of course, I mentioned the Dagestan attacks, Derbent, and again, AQAP, same thing. If you look at their activity areas and the number of and the looting and trafficking in those areas, you can see a connection between the increase in looting and trafficking over a period of time, coupled with the increase in attacks or military activity as well by those same groups. I think we can end here. You can find a lot of our information in our reports. We are working on our initial report was published in 2019. We are working on an updated report, which I believe will be, the plan was to get it out sometime in August, but probably, or sometime in September, more like, I think September. And I would like to thank everyone for joining us and for listening to my talk, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, Duncan.
I do, yeah, Dr. Amr, thank you so much. What a fascinating subject, and it starts off being something that can be quite niche, but actually you've painted a picture there where it can sort of grip its tentacles into almost all parts of thinking about terrorism, counterterrorism, as you just mentioned. I had a couple of quick questions. We've talked a lot about the platforms, so Facebook, you mentioned TikTok towards the end. Are there, and sort of Google, YouTube, are there any, does this spread across all forms of social media? Are we talking Snapchat, Discord, Telegram, to name but a few, or is the biggest market seems to be on Facebook?
Well, Facebook is very popular, okay, and it's also quite versatile, but a lot of these platforms, their popularity is driven by certain age group, but they all share similar features as well. So technically, any feature on a social media platform that allows you to share information can be used, and any platform that allows you to communicate in an encrypted manner can be used. And then popularity. So TikTok happens to be very popular right now. Before, I mean, my daughters think I'm a dinosaur because I still use Facebook. Okay. But you got to look at also your average buyer, user, and age of user of is the because think of it as if you're connecting supply and demand, okay, I think Facebook is still going to be most popular because on the demand side, at least, a lot of the users are going to be more likely to be on Facebook than they are going to be on TikTok. So I think there's that element too that makes Facebook maybe more popular, or still, I should say, still the major source of popularity with this kind of activity. Yeah. And again, I urge you to remember that it's not just, I mean, okay, I work on cultural property, I work on antiquities trafficking and looting, but remember, anything can be trafficked and traded. And if you go into Facebook, I know when we started doing this research, and our research became known, we were approached by people who look at the looting and who look at the trafficking and all sorts of things. They monitor the same thing in these groups. They're groups for them. So you want to buy rare spiders? There are groups that specialize in buying and selling rare spiders. You want to buy human body parts, and I don't mean I'd like to sell you my kidney. I'm talking about, do you want to buy, a mummified arm, or do you want to buy a freshly severed ear, or really gruesome, really, or skulls or legs, really gruesome stuff. And not to mention sales of drugs, narcotics, pharmaceuticals, all illicitly trafficked. Human trafficking, major problem. I can show you on Marketplace. I mean, obviously I don't include it here because it's not relevant to our talk, but where you can you can essentially rent a pillow by the hour. The advert is for pillows, but you know who's clutching the pillow. And you basically rent, and it's offered for sale openly on Marketplace. And it's not clearly a trafficked teenager here you're dealing with.
Sure.
and it's there. So these platforms are extremely versatile. They can be used to traffic anything and promote anything. The algorithm automatically kicks in and promotes and amplifies and intensifies and invites people who are interested in this kind of activity.
And I think that the last one I wanted to ask about was and I think you touched on it, about the sort of the size of the market, but is there any sort of information about the percentage perhaps that in terms of terrorist financing? You mentioned things like weapons, people trafficking, petrochemicals, etc. But any ideas about what the percentage might be?
I know there are, okay, the official size of the let's say the legal market, these are published figures. You can, I don't know them off the top of my head. I know they're I've heard figures of 4 billion and 5 billion bandied around out there, but just remember that we deal in snapshots. So I know, I can tell you, for example, that this item was looted. It was offered on such and such a day, maybe, or in such and such a year. It was offered for sale here and here and here, and then it seems to have disappeared. So we assume it got sold, and market value is X. But it's just this one item. I don't know. I don't have a sense of everything that comes out. You may be able to do some studies on maybe volume of objects being offered and try to get some sense of what's happening. But it's very, very difficult, I think, to get a real estimate. But I can tell you one thing for sure, and maybe this could be the kind of closing comment on this, is that when a group like ISIS decides to get involved in the looting and trafficking of antiquities and sale of antiquities, it decides to get involved in every stage of this activity. When it devises, means of controlling this activity, when it establishes offices and appoints people and pays them salaries to manage this process, when it invests its own money to bring in diggers and machinery and starts to actively engage in the activity itself, there is profit. They're not going to spend their own money, and they're going to put time and effort into investing into this if they're not making money. So the fact that they're doing this tells me they're making money, and they're making enough money to warrant the time and effort and resources they've invested. They're getting a good return on their money.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Okay, hey, Dr. Amr, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your talk there. I think a fascinating subject, something that people are interested in defense security issues wouldn't immediately think about, but there's clearly lots more to find out on that topic.